Washington, Texas. How do the arguments of the Federalists and Anti-Federalists reflect their points of view regarding national rights, republicanism, and powers of the states? Why do the Anti-Federalists and Federalist debates why are they still relevant today?
In a letter to John Duane, Alexander Hamilton lamented that the Articles of Confederation created an empire composed of confederated states, each with a government completely organized within itself, and that the common sovereign will not have the power sufficient to unite the different members together and direct the common forces to the interest and happiness of the whole. Due to this widespread sentiment, a convention was called to create a government that would unite the states while upholding the ideals of freedom and democracy, resulting in the abandonment of the Articles and drafting of the Constitution. When this document was sent to states for ratification, two groups emerged with vastly different views regarding the role of government.
The Federalists favored the Constitution and its strong national government with the abilities to regulate currency, commerce, and enforce national law. As stated by James Madison in Federalist 51, there was not sufficient virtue among men for self-government. Therefore, a strong presiding power was necessary to maintain men's liberty and right. Anti-Federalists opposed this plan. While they agreed that the Articles were insufficient, they expressed in the paper Sentinel-1 their fear that the dominance granted to the central government under the Constitution's necessary and proper and supremacy clauses would absorb the state legislators and judiciaries. Due to this fear, Anti-Federalists were in favor of a national Bill of Rights, arguing that without those rights explicitly stated, they would be encroached upon and eventually eroded by the sands of time. Alexander Hamilton claimed in Federalist 84 that individual rights were not only implicitly stated and protected by most state constitutions, but also that the explicit delineation of certain rights in the Constitution would naturally exclude those unstated.
Federalists believed the central government should have supreme sovereignty, but that states had separate localized powers. Madison delineated these powers in Federalist 45, stating that those reserved to the several states will extend to all the objects which concern the lives, liberties, and properties of the people, and the internal order, improvement, and prosperity of the state. In regards to republicanism, Federalists held in Federalist 10 that the delegation of the government to a small number of citizens elected by the rest will refine and enlarge the public views by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens, whose wisdom may best discern the true interests of their country. Furthermore, Federalists felt that only a large central government could protect all people's natural rights through the ideals of republicanism.
Anti-Federalists disagreed with this view of a powerful central government, arguing that state governments should have more power. They developed this position based on the argument of Baron de Montesquieu in The Spirit of Laws, that in a small local government, the interest of the public is easier perceived, better understood, and more within the reach of every citizen. Because of this philosophy, Anti-Federalists believe the state should have the powers to tax their constituents, regulate slave trade, and deal with internal affairs, as proposed in Brutus VI. They also argued for more local state governments, as they believed the representation offered in the national government would not uphold Republican ideals. Anti-Federalists claimed in Sentinel-1 that the number of representatives in the House appears to be too few, and the term for which they are to be chosen too long to preserve a due dependence and accountability to their constituents.
In regards to natural rights theory, the Anti-Federalists addressed in Brutus I the social contract that all citizens must enter when they consent to a government, but they also warned the dangers of relinquishing too many of their rights. Many instances can be produced in which the people have voluntarily increased the powers of their rulers, but few, if any, in which rulers have willingly abridged their authority. Their insistence on an explicit national Bill of Rights stems from their belief that the people must protect themselves from government tyranny.
The Federalist and Anti-Federalist debates remain relevant, as the role of national government is still contested today. Modern Anti-Federalists, such as Republican presidential candidate Rand Paul, believe that the federal government is increasingly and frighteningly less respectful of the individual and more certain of its own omnipotence. This authoritarian trend has been as rapid as it is dangerous. Modern Federalists, such as Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, disagree with this view and promote the idea that the national government should expand its power to encompass institutions such as healthcare and education. The generous application of the Commerce Clause in Article 1, Section 8 has allowed the national government to expand its power beyond what the founders intended. Ambiguities such as these, as well as the founders' division regarding government jurisdiction, contribute to the ongoing debate. Thank you.
420.
Hey.
Oh, okay. 420. Go ahead, you can. Another question? Go ahead, Mr. Samuel. Yeah, I'm off the top of your head.
So you mentioned two presidential candidates as you know, Federalists or anti-Federalists, Bernie Sanders and Rand Paul. A lot of people would consider those two to be kind of outliers. You know, some people think they're on the fringes or the extremes of their party. Other than on the outskirts, do the Federalist and anti-Federalist debates have any resonance on what people would call the mainstream or the centrist candidates for president?
Well, the Federalist and Anti-Federalist debates are definitely relevant for all candidates because despite whether or not they are an extreme outlier, everyone has a belief of what the role of government is. So other Republican candidates believe that government should regulate certain things. A lot of Republican candidates believe the government should regulate marriage and marriage laws and do not agree with the gay marriage ruling. And several Democratic candidates believe that the government should expand its powers to increase health care and other such things. So the anti-federalist debates are definitely relevant for all candidates.
I think the Republicans' adamant attack on the Affordable Care Act can be seen in their anti-federalist views. They don't think the government should have its role expanding over healthcare to that extent, and that was a major founding concept for the anti-federalists. They didn't think the Commerce Clause should ever extend to that extent, let alone how it has today. So I think that's each candidate has expressed their hatred for the Affordable Care Act almost.
I agree with my ex Nicole over there. The perfect example of something that has to do with healthcare is Hillary Clinton. She has proposed, since the recent hike in drug prices, she has proposed that the government actually bring in competition from Canada, and that could be a reference to the Federalist and the anti-Federalist debates, and saying that the government should take a bigger role in this and not allow drug companies to monopolize the industry.
One last example of this Federalist versus anti-Federalist debate is presidential candidate Mitch McConnell, who really embraces the Federalist ideal that the government should insert itself into programs for the regulation of the environment, as he's a member of the Green Party.
Mitch McConnell, member of the Green Party?
The Senate Majority Leader?
Oh, whoops, sorry.
Somebody
but
else, but the, okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay. But the Green Party guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Get the name, I was actually asking.
So when you guys talked about the necessity of the Bill of Rights from the anti-federalist perspective to protect rights, so who, just because the rights are written down, who the anti-federalists believe would actually be in charge of protecting these rights?
It's rather the people who are who have to protect these rights, because constantly they have to make sure that they're not infringed upon by speaking out, by proposing amicus curiae briefs. They have to constantly enforce that those rights aren't taken away from them. That's their job, to check the government.
And because they're written down, it's almost a reminder. It's like something that the citizens can look at and see, like, oh, hey, I have these explicit rights. And if they're not written down, they can be quickly forgotten.
I disagree with both Nicole and Trevor in saying that it's more up to the states. I feel like the anti-federalists would want the states to be able to regulate these things because they don't want a strong central government to control everything, and the next level of that is the states, and that's why what they really cared about.
What are the, what we would call the police powers of the states? And why are the traditional police powers of the states important in this federalist, anti-federalist debate? Michael's trying to reason through it. That's it. Take a stab at it, I don't care.
Okay, one of the police powers of the states is their rights to govern the time, means, and manner in which elections are conducted. Although this is a great gain on the anti-federalist position, this has been abused throughout history with evidence such as the Jim Crow laws, the grandfather clauses, and things like
traditionally, a nation or a state or a sovereign has, inherent government powers, which we would call police powers. And in particular, I think that Reagan, you deduced it very well. And it's pretty close. I mean, effectively, it's the right to govern and regulate education, health, safety, welfare, kind of the classical Republican concepts of government. We would call the police powers. What role did and does the idea that states have inherent police powers over their citizens or residents, what role does that have in this anti-federalist debate?
Well, we see in the anti-federalist point of view that they were strongly in favor of keeping as many police powers for states as possible. They did not want to relinquish any of these rights to regulate education and health care. And that's why today when we see the anti-federalist debates with anti-federalists being upset about health care and the Commerce Clause being used to send health care to the national government's hands, we can see that anti-federalists are upset about losing those police powers.
Anti-federalists additionally are against the No Child Left Behind, where the federal government has decided certain benchmarks must be enforced in education, which was formerly kind of in the state's jurisdiction and has been overwhelmingly taken over in things like that.
Another example of the federal government kind of encroaching in on the state's police powers, but the states retained it eventually, was the case of U.S. versus Lopez, in which Lopez, he brings a gun to school, tries to sell it, and he gets caught, but the government, or he's apprehended under the Commerce Clause because it's affecting interstate, they go into detail, but like the economic welfare of all the students in the school, but that was eventually stricken down by the Supreme Court, and the states retained that right to control.
Until they rewrote the Commerce
Yeah.
Clause the next year.
Yeah.
Or they rewrote the law next year.
To fit it. Okay.
Stop there. We're good?
You want your comment,